My name is Peter McLean, Regional Sales Manager for Atlantic Canada, as well as Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And today we're going to talk about audio systems for houses of worship. So we'll get into the products that fill the void in house of worship, but some things to keep in mind in designing, ways to approach the design, and how TOA can help on those solutions. That being said, we'll move along. So again, designing sound systems for house of worship. There's a whole variety when it comes to house of worship, depending on faith and so on. So design considerations are all over the place, especially pertaining to seating positions and so on, balconies, and the type of house of worship, whether it's just spoken voice or musical or a rock and roll church, that type of things. There's lots of considerations to keep in mind. TOA offers a variety of system options to suit the needs of these customers and the necessity of the venue. So where do we start? Someone gets a call or walks in the door, saying they have a facility looking for sound reinforcement in their house of worship. So here's some questions to ask the client. Is there a current system? If so, how old is it? My experience working on these type of facilities is they usually get 3 systems through a period of time. One is the system that they inherit or is passed on from other older facilities or churches that may have closed. The second one is the one that someone in the congregation thinks they know what should go in there, which doesn't really work as well. And the third one is usually when they come see you and us and we put together a proper system, not only for audio sound reinforcement, but the key is easy use. So we want to know what they do have. Again, how old is it? What components are there? Maybe along the way you'll find that they'll do fundraisers, and there's some components that are older or newer than others. And again, it's always budget with house of worship. So we can always assess, whether some of the equipment there, whether speakers or amplifier or microphone, may be used. A lot of times, if they can use a couple components, that definitely does make them happy and receptive on the rest of the design, if it makes sense. Again, what do they dislike about the existing system? There are troubles. Is it feedback? Is it clarity in the back? Is it reverberation? Is it easy use? So understanding what problems they have and challenges they have right now. A lot of times that will probably require a site visit or something like that, but it's something that they can research and present you all at once, so you know exactly what you're looking to overcome. The point I already mentioned again, concept they wish to keep, and maybe because they just purchased it. What functions will the new system need to be capable of providing? Sometimes we'll find maybe there's an overflow area or a separate multi-purpose space that, a couple times a year they need to provide audio to, or maybe some exterior coverage. So again, what's the functionality? Is there, different sources going to different zones as well as combining? So that type of thing is important to understand. How soon do they want the system to be in place? Of course, we're all familiar with timelines, and it's always hard, as we know, but budget for the designated system. Again, you can go with the Cadillac and audio, as we all know, or you can go with entry level, or again, maybe it's a 3-step or 2-step process on covering most of the needs on version 1 and allowing that expandability to maybe fill in a balcony or a secondary overflow room on a next phase when they have maybe more funds available. So, understanding the budget will help us work within that budget to give them the maximum system and solution. Questions for the installer? Facility use, what type of sound? Again, it's really key to understand this. I've seen mistakes made where, again, they're designed around, speakers that are the purpose is sound reinforcement, not as much music. Speech is definitely, in the house of worship, is the most important functionality, but there may be other things besides speech, like music. So again, if they're looking to pipe in, bass, keyboards, and drums, which we do see, then we have to get speakers a little bit more low frequency output, higher output, and would affect the mixing console and inputs we have available. And those inputs, we need to know whether it's just 4 vocal mics, for speech, or we're miking a whole drum kit or whatever it may be. So understanding that use is key, and then will help us understand what type of speakers and the need. Maybe there's a need for subwoofers as well. So that's important on that side. Facility type and size. When it comes to design, we always, I'll get into us and how we can help you on the design side of things, but we need dimensions. Sometimes they're available, sometimes it's a newer facility being built or something recently built, and you'll have drawings. If we can get them in CAD, you get them in CAD, that's perfect. Still PDF will work. If not, if you have a laser pointer, and a sketch, I know I'm not much of a sketch artist, but a little bit of graph paper and a laser pointer will get some key measurements, because you really would need to know that. Also, with the aesthetics of the church and various types of design elements and ceilings and pillars, it's good to understand those type of considerations. A lot of times we'll do higher ceilings maybe in the rear part of it, but near the front, maybe lower. So how does that change throughout front to back or left to right? Again, balcony, facility material. One thing that's always key in any type of room is, whether it's a very reverberant space, whether they have any kind of sound absorption material, what is, is it a control room or a very loud one? So it's something to be concerned about or aware of. Let them also understand that that's key in the design factor as well. Number of speakers, location of speakers. Again, where can you not put the speakers? Again, you may see a drywall ceiling. Can I get there? Is there depth behind that drywall ceiling? One struggle in older facilities and house of worship is there asbestos in certain areas? So that'll, give some information whether we can get surface mount or side mount or what we need or what we cannot do when it comes to putting the equipment in those spaces. Mounting height, reinforcement behind. If we're looking at either flying a speaker or wall mounting a speaker, what's behind it? Can it handle the weight? That sort of thing of the structure. And the wiring requirements, which are key too. Can we get wire to that speaker? And how are we doing so? Which, of course, is I can't on putting a speaker there, but it also definitely affects the labor side of things when all of a sudden you run into an area where I can't go get there from here. So it's a lot of times there'll be someone in the facility that will have that information, part of the congregation. Many times there may be an electrical involved. I find generally there will be someone on staff that has some information on running wires or may sometimes help. I've seen it where it's a matter of design, providing equipment, terminating equipment, commissioning equipment, but they may have an electrical to run some wires because they know that building. That can be an option as well. On the venue, a little bit more assessment and then pre-planning on what their needs are is resources. So how many speakers, where will be? Are they stationary? Are they moving? When it comes into music, solo vocalists, you may say, okay, we have a choir, we'll put a couple maybe choir microphones. But is there a soloist or someone that steps up? So maybe they need a microphone a little bit closer to them, or maybe they need a wireless microphone or a dedicated one just for them. Part of it may be announcements throughout the facility, general paging. So maybe more just in the sanctuary or room like that, maybe it's general paging throughout, which is, again, general announcements, or it could be just for overflow or larger events. Also could be evacuation as well. Even coverage, fronts, sides, rows, so that's really key. We see a lot of these facilities that are designed a little bit poorly because they try to cover too much of these spaces with too few speakers. And a lot of times it comes down to maybe more speakers at a lower volume given an even coverage. Again, when we're looking at coverage under a balcony, because that's going to be affected if we're just, maybe it's a smaller facility with front, left, and right speakers may cover it, but it's affected by underneath the balcony, so you may need some fills there, or above the balcony. Dynamic range, we talked about that, speech or band sound, full range or limited range. And the one that's really key is ease of operations. So some churches, let's say, rock and roll crusade church, we're seeing that where they do have bands that come in and play and fill in at certain points. They might want a full mixing console and desk with some automatic control. A lot of them don't, so simplicity of use is key. So, and we'll get into some of the functionalities, but things will handle feedback elimination or muting or very just simple on and offs sources and that type of thing. They make it very simple for anybody to control. A lot of times. So venue assessment. Medium and large spaces. Again, that'll all come with the drawings and site visits, hard services. Again, going in there, clapping, talking. I've seen rooms that need very, very little sound reinforcement just to fill it in. Just depends, how they were designed, when they were designed, and the purpose. Sometimes the most architecturally, nice-looking rooms are very bad for audio. We probably have experienced that before. So that comes down to reverberating that environment. And sometimes beyond the audio solution, if you do offer acoustic panels or treatment like that, it may be something that, they may need to look at as well. Your distance to the rear, distance, so measurements are very important. Obstacles, columns, ceilings, the pews, distance to microphones and feedback. How are they used to talking into the system? Are they very used to, being back from the microphone a foot, 2 foot, on the altar, or things like that? Is it a boundary microphone they need? Things like that to really understand how they're using the system currently, and then, maybe some of that stays the same, but maybe just needs to be updated. So to understand that is important. Audience. The one key thing is, what is their audience? Older, hearing impaired. If someone is, a lot of the congregation is hearing impaired, it's really hard to make a system that's going to work very, very good for them without maybe being, a little bit too loud, or maybe frequency-wise not sound correct for the rest of the congregation. So there may be some hearing assist that they need to look to add on to the system for people depending on their level of hearing impairment. And again, I mentioned earlier, sitting, standing, different face have different uses in how they use the space. A lot of sitting or kneeling, or again, could be standing and sitting. So that is important to understand. And again, additional feeds. If it is getting into a choir or a live band, they may need outputs from the head end for monitors. How many monitors do they need? Sometimes, in a typical band, you'd have a monitor for the drums, singer, maybe bass and guitar. Maybe they need 4 different individual monitors. Maybe they don't. Sometimes there's outputs to go onto online viewing services for online, worship. So it needs to feed to some kind of a web interface to transmit that information. So those are some questions to keep in mind. I'm sure one thing I'll know, and I'm sure Nelson can, at the conclusion of this, we can probably PDF this presentation, send this out to you so you can kind of go through some of these questions. So you're not spending the whole time making notes. Installation and design. Most common challenge is direct versus reflected sound. So system optimized for vocal range. Again, in that type of scenario, it's a little bit of low frequency mids and highs, no sub. These rooms can be very, very reverberant. Lots of hard surfaces, not a lot of absorption. Maybe carpet, maybe there is something on the walls a little bit. A lot of them you're dealing with hard surfaces. So with dealing that, speaker placement is key. So closer to the listener. Placement minimizes surface reflection. So the closer the speakers are to the people in the congregation, the pews and the seats, the better it is. And by doing that, you're reducing the reflected sound over the direct sound. You're not trying to fire and fill in from a greater distance. And it reduces that reverb effect. High quality microphones. Again, how they're using the microphone, condenser type microphones are going to be more robust and more sensitive. More so sensitive in picking up speech, meaning you would not have to be as close to the microphone for it to pick you up intelligibly. A dynamic microphone is a little bit more robust for, If you drop it and so on, condenser is a little bit more fragile. But condenser microphone, you'll have to be, very close to that microphone. If they do complain about that type of functionality, again, it may be that the settings in their hand are not set up with the right gain structure on the microphone, or it may be that they're using dynamic microphones. A lot of time you'll see the very popular SM58 microphones used around. They're a dynamic microphone. You pretty much need to be right on them. Once you get further away from them, then to pick you up, then you'll start worrying about feedback, because you're going to pick up a large area around before you'll pick up your voice. So picking the right microphone as well as the directional pattern is key. One big not a mistake, but a common issue in house of worship is the selection of an omni-mount, lavalier microphone. An omni-mount omni pickup microphone will pick up all around the microphone, so 360 degrees around the microphone. So regardless of how they clip on that microphone, it'll pick up your voice, whether it's upside down or not, and so on. So it's good for that. But if training-wise they can pick a unidirectional microphone, and in the training side of things, they learn to be able to clip them on, and then at a certain point of it points to the mouth, then it's got to, just focus on that area and not pick up around where you don't want sound. So a omnidirectional microphone is more, prone to feedback and picking up room noise, whereas a unidirectional microphone is going to focus a little bit more on the intended source. So a lot of that is education of using it, but the benefits are going to be a clear, less troublesome sound. Installations, options. So we'll look at some of the typical setups of this is kind of a room looking down. So the first one is kind of an LCR type of pickup. So these are for rooms with little or no obstruction, very directional. Again, you're going to cover from the front to the rear. Depending on the width of the room, it may be just the left and right, or you could have an LCR and have a left, center, right. A lot of times, that's the kind of coverage we'll see in the house of worship. Depending on scenario, you may need flown clusters. Flown clusters can be a little bit troublesome because, let me just see where my pointer. Laser pointer, if you can see that. Flown center clusters. This is the front of the church and the congregation is out in this area, you have a chance of feedback maybe there. So sometimes you'll see maybe a cluster in the rear covering that way. Generally, more or less, you'll see a combination of, the front left, center right, or left right, and a distributed system. So a distributed system is utilizing maybe the walls. So you might have a very deep room where you might have left and right up front, and then you'll have a mid-type speaker in the walls and maybe a rear-type speaker in the walls. Sometimes this is the only option to have is this distributed wall column type solution, because you can't put any speakers in the front. There's no walls, or you can't get them high enough to fly them. So you may have to look at this type of scenario, which is quite common and doable. So these are these two here are probably the most common type scenarios. And again, line array. A line array generally is going to be part of this solution. They're flown. They could be on walls. And we'll talk a little bit about what line arrays are and what they do and how they benefit in these cases. So there's a lot to consider before we get into some of the solutions. On the TOA side, what we can offer you is we're here to help you on the design side of things. So there's RSMs that cover across the country, and we're here to help with the questions and putting together a proposal that fits the needs of your client at that facility, taking into consideration all the information that you first gathered. So especially if you haven't done many of these type of facilities, in the initial one or two, definitely, having us involved should help. And that may include a site visit or being part of that process as well. So the next slide, we're going to go look at TOA products and design tools that we offer. If you get us involved on a facility, and what we can do to make the solution effective and verify that it will work, and so you can show the customer how the design will work, and really ease them that yes, this is finally going to be the third and right solution as opposed to the first donated system, the second one where so much of the congregation, like I said, thought they tried their best, but they didn't have all the tools at their disposal to make the right system. One thing to point out for information on the product line TOA is go to toacanada.com for any information on product. If you just Google TOA, TOA is unique in that wherever product is sold is an office located in the country. So there's TOA Canada located with stock, tech support parts in Mississauga, Ontario. But there's TOA USA in the United States and ones in various countries. So be sure you look and you go to toacanada.com. Sometimes there's product that we bring in that maybe the United States doesn't, different territories don't, or subtle changes and things like that. So that's where you can go to get your A&E specification, catalogs, data library, software, things like that. There is a link there for design help. So I just want to point that out as we go through this. Also available on the website is some templates. And these templates will go through a lot of those questions we ask with regards to intended use, sources, building type considerations along that. And you can even break it down to certain zones if there's multiple, rooms within that facility, sanctuary area and overflow, washrooms, office, multi-purpose room, place like that. You can break information down per zone. So that's a nice downloadable sheet that is available on the website. One thing TOA uses, and I've been trained as well, which is a great tool, is we provide full ease design. We don't charge for that. Ease is an audio modeling software. So what it is, it's an industry-used software. So it's not proprietary or anything like that. But if you are able to get us the drawings, the plans, or again, good information and a sketch of length, width, height, and that type of thing, we can basically create that room in this software and look at considerations of where we can mount, where we can't mount, that type of thing, or where we can run wires. And intended use, select speakers, and see how it's going to work in that space. So we will know the audio coverage and any troublesome issues or things like that would arise in that space. So it's good to reaffirm, that we're on the right track on the design side of things. It's also really good in the presentation side to say, this is why I'm proposing these speakers or this type or that type and where they need to go, because it'll show you again your SPL and depending on how far into these models go, intelligibility and that type of thing. So it's really good to back up your design rather than just a parts list. And it's an advantage that maybe competitors are not offering. Instead of just having a piece of paper with a bunch of parts, this really backs up that design. One other important thing about it is, as I mentioned earlier, in budget, if there is a budget and maybe it says we need to use, speakers in the front, on the left-hand side of this drawing is whom facing from, I'll call it the stage, kind of front of the church to the congregation to the right. Maybe, our design says we need some rear fills because we're getting, maybe it's not as good coverage in the rear. If they don't have the budget for that, they need to cut. Well, you definitely not going to cut your main speakers, you'll cut your fill speakers. But at least they can see the difference between, a 4-speaker solution and a 2-speaker solution, so they understand once it's installed, and maybe they notice, okay, well, the back few rows are not as clear. Well, this is what we told you in the design side of things. So at least they understand what they're going to get, and they understand if they do decide to add that in the road, that will fill in that area. Additionally, when we get into complex systems and line arrays and where speaker placements are, this printout that we can provide will tell you exactly where the speaker mounts and exactly how to angle it down. So for the installer side of things, it'll be very precise, and some of our speakers have multi chambers or compartments or sections that have the ability to be changed in their angle of dispersion. So let's just tell you exactly how each one of those will be set up to get optimal coverage. So it really cuts in some any guesswork for the installation side of things as well. So we'll get into a quick overview of some products. TOA does offer a wide range of wireless microphones, starting from the S410 on the left-hand side to the Trantec S5.3, and the bottom center we've got the 5000 series. All wireless microphones are not created equal, and a lot of times it's one area that house worships tend to say, well, I just need an inexpensive microphone. You know, we've got a main one. I just need another one for the choir. And where microphones are not created equal, yes, there's robustness in the style of microphones, but one key thing is how they work and whether they are. You may hear terms like true diversity, things like that. Generally, when I look at wireless microphones in most spaces, especially houses of worship and so on, where again you may have a priest or someone presiding in the congregation speaking, that's your weak link there. It's a wireless unit, and you can spend X amount of thousands of dollars on an audio system, but if that wireless microphone doesn't work, you're toast, and nothing's going through. So the better microphones generally are a true diversity microphone. And what that means is actually in the box, these all have two antennas, but the True Diversity is the only version and style that has actually two tuners or receivers in the box. So what that does is these two tuners are monitoring the signal from the antennas, and once one gets a little bit lower, maybe there's some interference as someone's moving around, it looks at the second one and says, okay, this one's stronger or weaker, and knows whether it's a switch or not. So basically, it's monitoring your wireless signal and is doing smart switching. So when presenting and looking at options for wireless microphones, definitely just don't do it on price and look at that function of True Diversity, because down the road, if that starts cutting out, it kind of reflects poorly on the whole system and design. So one thing to definitely be aware of. For those in the group that may or may not be aware of what line, I want to touch upon that. There's conventional speakers, and then there's line arrays. TOA, as other manufacturers, manufacture both. Conventional speaker is what you see in a box speaker with maybe, it could be a two-way with a woofer and tweeter, a three-way with a tweeter mid-range and woofer. So that's over here on your right, a standard speaker. So when you look at the spec of the standard speaker, it's going to give you some dispersion information, usually a horizontal dispersion, maybe 9 degrees, and a vertical dispersion, let's say that's 90 degrees. So it's throwing sound left and right, up and down, and directly to you. So in reverberant spaces, every speaker has their perfect spot, and maybe it is budget. But in areas like house of worship that tend to be reverberant areas and hard surfaces and so on, trying to reduce the delayed reflected sound is really key. And then on the design side of things, reducing any kind of problem before you have to use processing power, EQ, and that type of thing. If you can nip it in the bud before that, will make the system much easier down the road. So a solution to reduce some of that indirect audio source, again, we've got sound deriving directly out of the ear and some off the ceiling, coming out of delay, is the use of a line array. And there's a whole variety of line arrays. But the basics of a line array is that when you stack multiple drivers in a vertical array, the vertical dispersion will collapse. So what you do is you collapse that vertical above and below the speaker, depending on the design. So this would be a 0-degree vertical by probably a 90-degree line array. So it's going to give you your dispersion on the horizontal plane, but on the vertical plane, it's really focused on you. So again, if you're sitting and standing, you're right in that beam path right there. If you're on the floor or sitting, then you're going to lose a lot of that information and not, a good percentage did not hear, what is going on. So the advantage of that is that it's not throwing sound up at the ceiling. So again, picking the right line array, angling it, above here we have one that's curved, maybe this tiered seating. So the curved one will give you from the front row to the standing in the back of the tiered seating or standing area. But again, you're reducing that dispersion above into the ceiling in areas that you don't need sound. And in those areas, it's that sound and energy will just build and build and build, and again, it becomes just a very noise reverberant room. So line arrays, house of worship, 9 times out of 10 are going to be your solution. So we'll talk about some of TOA line arrays. These are our HX7s. So we have 2 styles. The next style I'll talk about is, or versions of this, or flavors, the HX5, but they're along this type of scenario configuration. So one HX7 is 4 modules. Each of these modules, you can adjust their angle. So you got 0 degrees, 15 degrees, 30, 46, and 60 degrees dispersion. So they can be straight up or they can be curved, depending on the coverage and what we need. So again, they can really be tailored for that room and how it's configured. So that's the version of those. Again, the main difference between those and the HX5s is the size of the line array, low frequency. The HX5s are, a little bit step down with regards to the size of the drivers on low frequency. They are still full range cabinet, a little bit more punch out of the HX7s. But the key to understand is the functionality of each one of these modules, making one HX5 and how they can be adjusted. So there you see the tweeter array and then the full range driver array. Also, depending on the facility too, these are per se stackable. So I can have an array of 2, 3, 4 HX5s, depending on the scenario. I've seen house of worship where we can just mount in the center in the front of the church and for the whole area. So we'll go maybe with 3 HX5s right in the center, the top one shooting at the rear and the bottom one, focusing right at the front of the facility. So you have that function as well with these HX5s and adjusting. Just to note too, most of the speakers talking about are available in a black and or white as these ones are. The SRD is definitely something to be aware of. I won't spend much time on it, but this is a beam steerable active line array. So in this particular line array, there's software where you can adjust the dispersion via that the said software and control where the beams are covering. So I did a very old church called Basilica in St. John's, New Brunswick, and we couldn't touch anything wall-wise or run wires. There was existing speakers that were not where you want to have speakers. That's where there was wires, and that's where they have to go. So a lot of times you're stuck with scenarios like that. So the SRD8s allowed us to put a speaker in a non-desirable location, but adjust the dispersion to cover the area that we needed, and it worked very, very well in that particular application. It's more of a special needs, but again, you're dealing with old environment sometimes, and that is a very key solution to be aware of. Full range of slim line arrays, so those are SRS versions. The SRSs are available in a straight long throw, which is 0 degree dispersion, as well as a short throw. So there's an SRS4S or SRS4L. And these are kind of full range drivers and tweeter array, and they are stackable as well. So generally they're a lot taller and higher than the HX5s, but we can see these usually in a single stack. in a left and right or left, center, right in house of worship, or fills down. So again, if it's a little bit more musical of a facility, these have a little bit more full range. There wasn't a slide on the AX5s, but with all these speakers, there's a plethora of mounting brackets from wall mount, wall tilts, wall tilt pans, stand mounts, provisions for flying the speakers and hanging the speakers. So there is a wide variety of mounting options. One area to take note, if you have in the TOA catalog, not requested, on the back section of the catalog has all the modular speakers and mounting options. So you can look up, the SRS 4 series, and it'll list all the various mounting options. And there is a difference. Some are interior, some are weatherproof, and that type of thing. So they are all in one area. But we can always help you with that design selection. And that's something when we are involved, we'll make sure all the bits and pieces are in the proposal for said job. All right, there's the information on the H67s. So again, just to reiterate, you can adjust this coverage in those areas. There's provisions for subwoofers. So again, if they are putting some kick drums, a low frequency through an organ or keyboard of some sort, you can add that. And your plethora of various hanging, flying, array types configuration, depending on what your mounting needs are. On the power side, let's quickly touch full coverage amplification for all of those speakers. So we have 2-channel 250 watts amplifiers. We have 4-channel 250 watts. And we have 550 watts, 500 watt per channel amplifiers as well, in various configurations of low impedance or high impedance. So 4 ohm, 8 ohm, or 70 volt outputs. So depending what the scenario is, again, if it's speech, maybe you're just doing 70 volt in the front, and then you're just running from one speaker to the next speaker. If you're going full frequency, a little more impact, maybe you're running 8 ohm. It could be a combination of both, but we do have the amplifiers to fit the requirement that is designed out for you. I mentioned quickly the outputs of the amplifiers. So that's just the variation. That's all in your catalogs and online. Again, depending on the setup and what's required. The other things we'll look at is the head-end side of things. Very common series used in house of worship. In your entry-level to mid-size is a 9000 series amplifier. Some of you are familiar with this unit. It's a pretty powerful DSP and what it can do, whether it's just basic telephone paging or house of worship or smaller arenas. So it's one key unit that once you're used to it and specifying it and installers are used to working with it, it can offer a variety of solutions. So this particular unit is a DSP based, and I'll show you some pictures for the next slide, I believe. But it can handle your telephone paging inputs for manual and general paging if the facility requires it. Programming is done via PC or as well through the front panel. There is the control 4 drivers for it, so there's our AMX or Crestron control for it available as well. You have control in the front, so this unit does offer keypads, which you'll see next. But again, if you want to control the front, you have that option as well.
Cake. Maybe you're like one of those non-cake people.
So this is the 9000 series. There's a full variety of offerings for the 9000. Quickly, just to note, the unit is an 8x8 mixer matrix, and you populate it based upon what's required. So on the back of it is module slots, and each module slot either is dual input or output, or it could be a special module like digital message repeating or a keypad or something like that. So you get a chassis, and then you populate depending on what your needs are. Those chassis have a variety of options, so quickly going through those, there's a single 60 watt powered, a single 120 watt powered, single 240 watt powered, dual 60 powered or dual 120, or a fully passive version. So again, maybe you've got an area that has some general paging and then one sanctuary area. So you could go with, a powered 60 watt to do the general area and hallways and washrooms that can be powered off this unit. But then you can add a module, output module, to power amplifiers to do the main sanctuary area. And it can be zoned, again, as an 8x8 DSP, so you can do different configurations and settings depending on the use, and setting certain inputs or certain outputs depending on the functionality of said day and event. There are options when we talk about ease of use for keypads. So you got the keypads connect via control module in the back, the RC001D, and you have volume control, a 4-button and an 8-button. Sometimes we'll use this 4-button for scene settings, and scene settings would be pre-configured routing signals. Scene 1 could be just audio from the sanctuary, just goes to the sanctuary. Button 2 is scene 2, is audio to the sanctuary, also goes to the overflow room. That type of thing. We've also sometimes in house worship will configure it to empty church, quarter full, half full, and full. So it's a matter of output, maybe EQs, depending on what size event is happening. As we all know, once you start filling a room full of bodies, we start to absorb sound and change with the acoustic characteristics. So it allows you to contour that for them depending on what's going on. So use it that way. Or a combination of both. The ZN9014 allows you to pick sources and turn them on and on or off. So it could be multiple microphones or line level sources or Bluetooth, or you could stack sources. So button 1 is all the wireless mics on, button 2 is hardwire, or any combination. So it allows you to turn on and off sources and a volume control if you wish. So it makes it kind of simple, easy for them to use. Once you do set up the system, you can lock it in the front panel as well, so they can't get into it and play around with it too much. And you can set, the amount of the front panel you want to lock it. You could assign these buttons for that, configuration changes depending on whether it's, empty or full, or if they don't want to add a keypad or camera keypad, so you can set the level of lockout. We have our M633D, which is a rack style single view mixer, 6 mono, 3 stereo inputs. Very simple analog control, but it is a fully DSP powered mixer. No software to run, it's just the processing is digital. So some nice functionality this unit has is it adds feedback suppression. So on the microphones, it does have feedback suppression. So when in those systems where there's no one running a mixing board or anything like that in the room, and maybe again someone's on a microphone is a little bit out of their normal area of walking around, or maybe it's something happening at Christmas or so on, a special event, they get in front of that speaker and the high-pitched squeal that makes everybody kind of freeze up. This will automatically sense and pick up that runaway frequency and do an audio equalization of that frequency to make it no longer a problem. And then it will keep monitoring that frequency to say, okay, now it's no longer an issue. Then it'll return that equalization path up to what it was before. So it'll automatically take care of that issue. Another nice feature, and I've seen this fix a lot of troublesome rooms with regards to reverberation, is the ARC functionality. So ARC, I think there's a little slide next, but basically what ARC is acoustic resonance control, which is an auto EQ of the room. So similar to what a residential type of auto EQ for surround sound does. This is the pro side or version of that, which will send test tones through the facility, measure them, delays, reverberation, compare them, and do an auto preset EQ curve. So if you're limited to where the speakers go and there's no room acoustic treatment done, this nice add-on solution in this box will fix up and add intelligibility very nicely. That one actually should not have been there. I'll skip over that one. Another option is our M864D. So we're stepping up to this one. So this is a 15 input. Key has 8 microphone inputs, and then there's 7 stereo inputs. So again, when you get into a facility where you need more inputs for a band, keyboards, musicians, choirs, soloists, this one comes into play. It does have full analog control on the front, and it's got 4 outputs, so 4 output zones. And that could be main output for sound reinforcement. It could be an output for monitors to feed for the people in the choir or people in the band, output to different zones for overflow, so whichever way you want to configure that. There is nice software to configure this one. So this is a network-based device. So again, the software is nice and simple to ease into. I think that's on the next slide. Again, this one does incorporate acoustic resonance control built into it, as well as feedback control. And do a lot more control with PEQs on the inputs and output side of the M864D. Additionally, it does have preset PEQs on the outputs, depending what speakers you've chosen. So if you're using, let's say, HX5 line array, you can select that. It'll automatically load the PEQs for that speaker. Or if you're using it with an HX5 with a sub, there's another setting for that, and then it'll roll off some of the low frequency, and then you can add the PEQ for an FB120 subwoofer, and it'll add that. So it'll kind of take care of the crossover settings as per the manufacturing engineers that design the speakers. So that's nice too on the installation side, just to speed up for your installers, setting up the system. You know where the speakers are going via the ease design, the angles, and now setting up how they should be configured is pretty easy in the drop-down menu for that side of things. And again, you get the acoustic resonance control to do room EQ by pressing a button. So this is the GUI kind of interface for the M864. Again, you can control it from the front. You can lock that out if you wish. You can control it via the software. That gives you full control there. What's really nice is it does have iPad control as well. So that will allow you to do scene changes if you wish, or adjust volumes up and down if there's someone that is doing some sound control during certain events. They can walk around with the iPad and do some adjustments in that room. So I'll jump on the tech side, automatic resonance control. You can review this once you send it to PDF. But again, this is something very nice, again, to take into consideration rooms that are not acoustically adequate, per se. So it does really make a world of difference on those rooms and increase that intelligibility and things like that. So something to pay attention to. Also, when we talked about room setups and configuration, we talked about speakers along the front plane. I keep using the word sanctuary, and then again, whether it's a left, center, right, or left and right, and then maybe fill in the rear, and that could be column fills to the rear of the room. It could be fills underneath the balcony or fills above the balcony. And one thing, the key to include is processing for that. The 9000 series 8x8 mixer matrix does have some limited delays built in, and the DPSC3 is an advanced delay unit. It does do speaker processing and EQs, as I mentioned on the prior two DSTs, the M864 and the M63D. One key use is for delay control. So it's a common thing that I see sometimes in, from gyms to arenas to, your house of worship where you're focusing right now, is audio all, connected back, speakers all connected to one amplifier, maybe your load run 70 volt to a mixer, and you hear a lot of that hello, it's almost a reverberation. It's more of a slapback sound. And that's because there's no delays put on those rear speakers. So I don't think the next slide shows it, so I'll talk about it, is, again, if you're sitting in the rear of a room and there's someone speaking at the front of the room, and you're right beside that rear fill speaker, you're going to get that sound without delay. You're going to get that sound right away. So you're right by the speaker. Someone talks, test 1, 2, you're going to get that information right away. Then, depending on the distance of the front speakers or any other speakers in the room, then you're going to get a delayed feed from those speakers. So you'll get that initial hello, and you get a hello, hello. So now you've got a hello, hello, welcome, welcome. And depending the size of that venue and how many speakers, and if there's no delay, you can lose intelligibility quick. And maybe the room is a perfectly treated room, but without having a delay on your system, then, again, you lose all the benefits of what the design has. So this is the DPSP3 is a standalone unit that goes in between the mixer or DSP and the speakers that offers various output levels of control for EQs, PEQs, filters, crossovers, and most importantly, in this application, adding delays. You may get pulled into a facility that has recently updated again, and their only solution, it'd be nice to have a bigger project than a delay unit, is the fact that they don't have a delay unit. So maybe they need to add this and some separate channels of amplification to clean up their sound. So it's one thing to pay attention to when doing that site survey is what's existing. Is there any delay processing built into that? Got a few we're near the end here, and we're close to our time limit, so we'll keep that on track. Some applications of some systems. I think there's a few slides on this. So here we're looking at applications, small, maybe speech only. Certainly want to look on the design side of things at speakers first and design back in those speakers. So we may be looking at SRS full range or HX7s, no subwoofers or anything like that. We may need 2 or 4, so we got a DA250 here. So maybe we're powering 4 of those, or maybe we're bridging the channels. So we've got an amplifier. On this particular application, 8 inputs is good. We've got an M9000 unpowered version. That's what's feeding this particular unit. This unit, again, does have some delay functionalities built into it. So again, if we did have the the SRS4s in your front, and maybe the HX7s in a rear fill, we can provide 2 outputs to the DA250 on channel 1 and 2, and then 2 and 3 to have delay functionality, which is good. And then we have, on this particular application, 3 wireless microphones going into it. One other thing that I mentioned, I didn't mention it earlier on the wireless side of things, is location of the gear. Sometimes the gear is in the same room, sometimes it's hidden away in a closet somewhere. For all of our wireless, is pay attention to that. There are definitely wireless remote antennas that are an option. So antennas that will go physically in that room, so you don't have to worry about any issues going through walls and transmission and have to pick up will always stay there. So one thing that also note is remote antennas. Another house of worship here. More look at the visuals there. We have our HS1200. So we're dealing with a little bit of budget here. So these are a full range box with a tweeter line array. So we do have some control in the high frequencies. And then we have some fills along the side holes with our F2000s. So in this one, we don't get into full true line arrays. We're dealing with definitely a smaller facility with budget. Larger speech only. We have our fronts. Maybe left, centers, and rights. We have these in the front, and these in the left and right in our fronts. And then we have under balcony and fills going along the sides. So power amplifiers for those, power amplifiers under the balcony as well. We're still in this application using 9000, which again does have 8 outputs, so we could feed an output for different zones and outputs, again, maybe for transmitting via the web or something like that, and or wireless. Into larger scenarios, we can have our line arrays with our HX5s, HX7s, line arrays near the front on our mains. Then we have our outer balconies. These where we're getting into larger facilities here, so delays are going to be important. So we maybe need Besides the fact that we got to make sure we have them, is it may be over what the 9000 series can do. A lot of that is the distance amount of outputs it can add delay to. So we're adding the DPSP3. And in this scenario, we've got the M864D because we have more than the 9000 series or the M633D for inputs, and we want some maybe iPad control or so on. And the most, what's very important in this is that feedback suppression and acoustic resonance for that audio EQ. So a couple various scenarios and applications. As you can see, there's so many different rooms, and this is very similar to the other ones. This particular one, they are adding, putting a full band, so we're adding low frequencies on top of the fronts here. So we've got a left, center, right, and low frequency. And then we have upper balcony fill, another balcony. That could be lower balcony fill with that particular one. So again, when I talked near the end here, when we talked about how TOA can support on your projects, again, provide drawings and that initial information as I mentioned, and we can help with speaker placement, the ease plot data. We do a kind of a BOM template that we send off, and it'll show again the coverage, the speaker, the bracket, the angles. And what we can also do is work on a riser for it. So in this particular scenario, we're showing our speakers in the chapel, sanctuary, exterior, going back to the amplifiers, what wire gauge is needed, and type of wire, connection from the amplifier back to the DSP. This one's for speaker processing for the delays there. From there back to the DSP mixer processor, where we connect the keypads, wiring there, your wireless microphones, your input plates, your wireless microphones and their antennas, and all this. So, it makes it good and clear that, nothing's forgotten, what the wire is, what the interconnection is, and so on, to make it, to show the thought and process and make sure nothing's being missed and clear on the installation side. So that we pretty much do that for almost any design that we get involved in, just so there's nothing missed, and it's easy to troubleshoot down the road. And if nobody has anything else, say thank you very much. Do appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you all soon.